So what is the Old Testament? Last time we looked at what the Bible is. If you'd like to see that video, click here. I'll wait. Done? Good. This week we're looking at what the Old Testament is. So what is it? The simplest answer is that it's the first 39 books you'll find in the Bible. But that's not all the Old Testament is. The Old Testament covers all the books that are also found in the Hebrew Bible. It was coincidentally also written in Hebrew, and it tells the story of God's interactions with His people. It covers the story from the creation of everything right down to the last prophets before Jesus came. The story ends off roughly 300 years before the birth of Christ and mainly takes place in and around the Middle East, and mainly follows what became the Jews, who were called by God to be His people. Now when you open the Bible, you'll find the 39 books of the Old Testament all together, but they aren't exactly chronologically ordered. The first few are, however, with Genesis starting with the creation of the universe and the story unfolding through thousands of years. But once you reach 2 Kings, the next books, 1 and 2 Chronicles, kind of repeat the story from 1 and 2 Kings, but tell them in a different way. This is because 1 and 2 Chronicles were actually written much later than 1 and 2 Kings and reflect a different approach to the history of the kings. After that, the books are kind of jumbled. However, everything before Psalms covers the stories of the key people in Israel's history. These books from Genesis to Job make up the first 2 categories in which the books are placed, called the Pentateuch, or the Law, and the Writings, or the History. Next come the Songs and Wisdoms from Psalms through to Song of Songs, but Lamentation also needs to go in there. And then finally come the Prophets, sorted into the major and minor prophets. Though it is possible to get a chronological Bible, and though they are quite interesting, it's not necessary to read the Bible in chronological order, or any order for that matter, as each book is self-contained and written by a different author or collection of authors and needs to be understood in its own way. But together, all 39 books of the Old Testament tell the same story, one of an all-powerful creator who seeks to have a living relationship with his creation and calls upon a nation of followers to serve him and one another in a way that he intended. However, he plans much more for these people, but the Old Testament doesn't cover that part. That bigger and grander plan, that new promise to his people, is taken up in the New Testament. Thus the 2 names, the Old Testament for the time before the fulfillment of God's promise and the New Testament for the time after. And that is what the Old Testament is. Next time we'll be looking at what the New Testament is and how it's organized. But until then, God bless.